Learning a language at any age, unless rocking a pacifier is part of your outfit, has its fair share of ups and downs. When you first manage to string together, "Hi, my name is Kate and I have 2 cats," you're so proud and you're like, bilingual babe status is just months away. And then you're out and someone casually tells you that the way you're pronouncing the word kiss in French, you're giving off a little bit too much of a Z sound instead of an S sound, which actually means the F word. And then you're like, oh, and you want to disappear and you think, okay, bilingual babe status is a lot farther off than I actually thought. I absolutely had my ups and downs learning French, and 10 years later, I still make mistakes. So if you're ready, let's jump into the 5 biggest challenges that I have speaking French and learning French even today. There are 2 words in French to say you. There's the tu and there's the vous. So the tu form is actually a really informal way of speaking when you're talking to just one person. So if, for example, I was going to say to my sister, "Hey, would you like to order a pizza?" The you in that sentence, I would use the tu form. The vous form is going to be a formal way of speaking to one person. So if, for example, I was talking to a stranger on the street and I was like, "Where is the next metro stop?" I would use the vous form of you because I don't actually know this person and I want to be more formal. And then vous is actually also a plural way to speak to people. So even if I'm talking to my family, if I'm saying like, "Hey guys, what do you want to do today?" and I'm talking to multiple people, I would use the vous form. It sounds pretty clear, right? Don't be fooled. The 2 different ways of using you means that you have to conjugate the verbs after these different subjects differently. So it's a different way of pronunciation, it's a different way of spelling. Of course you could say, okay, it's not that complicated though, it's just memorization. And I do agree, but what's interesting in French language is that you constantly have exceptions to the rule of how you conjugate something. So it's not just like double the trouble of memorization, it almost sometimes feels like triple the trouble because there's so many exception rules that are going to go with each conjugation. So you've got a lot more memorization going on when it comes to conjugating verbs after you. At least memorizing isn't complicated per se, it's just very time consuming. But what I do find more complicated about the vous and tu form is like when you're actually supposed to use it. And of course they give you tips. So like the tu is generally used for people who are much younger than you, it's used for friends, it's used for family, it's used for friends of friends. And then the vous would be more formal, so this is used at work normally, or it's used when you're meeting strangers or when you're meeting somebody who's quite older than you. So they have general rules, but of course there's always exceptions, and sometimes it can be hard to know what to use in which instance. And if you use the vous when you should have used the tu, it looks like you're being quite cold or you're wanting to put distance between you and the other person. And then if you use the tu when you should have used the vous and you're going informal and you should have been formal, it can be a total insult. Like I would never accidentally want to use the tu when I'm doing French administration or I'm at the prefecture because it's seen as like very much an insult. Going off of subjects, let's just hit up my next one, which is the 3rd person singular en. There are so many different ways to use the word en that I cannot keep track of them. It's 3rd person singular, so it's actually replacing the word nous, which means we. So it technically means we, and it's used today in modern French. Normally orally, it's not really, you won't see it in writing or in books except by like text messages or when you're being really informal, but it means normally we. But it can have lots of other different meanings. It can mean someone, they, we as a group, you. It has so many different meanings, and it's really hard to tell sometimes what it actually means, because in order to know what en is today, you need to understand the context following the phrase. Now, when you're an advanced speaker in French, I promise you it starts to come naturally. But as you're learning, it's not natural at all. And even sometimes today, I'm like scratching my head like, okay, who the heck is en today? Because I did not get what you said afterwards. It's rough as an adult to try to mimic sounds that you've never had to use as a child. I personally had to go to lots of Saturday morning classes to try to improve my accent. It didn't work because I just can't say the DNR sound. I mean, I can't do it. But what I find equally difficult when it comes to pronunciation is in French, when you're reading, there are so many letters that are silent. When I say so many, I mean there's at least one letter in every sentence and in every paragraph that you don't actually pronounce. I know there's a purpose. It's going to tell you the gender. It'll tell you whether it's plural. It's going to be verb agreement. If there wasn't a purpose, I feel like the French would just chop it off. But it doesn't make it any easier when you're trying to read a word that you've never seen before. And when you're a non-native speaker, it's challenging with a capital C because what you see is not what you get in French. You might think when it comes to accents that I'm referring to regional accents, and that is challenging and will come next. But what I'm actually talking about in accents right now is those tiny dots and slashes that we put on words in French to help understand when a letter is not silent, how we should be pronouncing it. It's hard because in English we don't have accents, so often when you're a native English speaker, you kind of want to ignore the accents because they don't seem that important, but they're so important because they really do help you pronounce the word. And there are a lot of words in French that are spelled the exact same on paper, and the only difference, just to help you pronounce them differently, is the accents because they don't mean the same thing. For example, on paper, when you see the word élève and élevé, they're spelled exactly the same, but an élève is a student, and then élevé is like to raise somebody, for example. It has multiple meanings, but so they look the exact same on paper except for the accents, but the accents help you pronounce them differently so that people know what you're actually saying. Normally when I think of accents, I'm thinking of like the sexy, what I find to be the sexy French accent in English, or the very like posh accent in British English. I'm not really thinking about like the Scottish accent that for me is so thick, I almost can't understand what they're saying in my own mother tongue. And when it comes to French, that's kind of the regional accents that can be difficult. I can take a train 2 hours down to the south and it's completely a different accent, and I have to ask the woman in the boulangerie to repeat 3 times because I can't understand her, and I would have said 3 days ago that I was totally bilingual. Accents can change so much the way they pronounce words when you go to different places, as in many countries. But what's also really difficult is the vocabulary changes. So I remember when I went to school in Bordeaux and all of a sudden I was hearing the word gaver all the time, and I couldn't understand, what does this word gaver mean? Because se gaver in French is normally like to overeat, or to really stuff yourself. And gaver in the Bordeaux region is actually a word that replaces a lot, or it replaces very, and so you can use it 5 times in one paragraph. And I was like, oh, what's going on? So I would say vocabulary, you learn French in one area, and as soon as you move out of that area, you can be a little bit lost. Alright guys, those are the 5 biggest challenges that I face when learning French, but there's lots of challenges that people face when learning a language. And I know I didn't go over a lot in French, like genders can be difficult, to be and to have can be really difficult, so don't hesitate to leave all the different challenges you have in the comments below. And as always, there's a corresponding article on my blog, so don't hesitate to check that out. Till next time, bisous!